Hello, hello. You're listening to Peaceful Homeschool Podcast. I'm Emma.
And I'm Beth.
Hi, Beth. And today we have a special guest. Ian is joining us from Streamline Learning. Ian, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, no problem. I'm the CEO of Streamline Learning, and as I just finished telling you guys, I see myself as, I guess, the mom whisperer, but also a sort of mom who's mothering children from high school to college, usually, or that those ages, specifically focusing on things like test prep, learner development, making sure kids are ready to go on to the next phase. So I'm excited to share my story and find what kind of insights we can dig into here.
Okay,
Cool.
Super cool. So can you tell us a little bit? Obviously, most of our listeners, we assume, are from the homeschool community. We know our demographic is mostly homeschool moms, or at least moms, in a certain age range around the world, but mostly focused in the U.S. Can you tell us how you got started, or tell us a little bit about your program, and then how that kind of relates within the homeschool community?
Sure. Well, I think maybe just to kind of think about the book that I wrote, School Sucks, Your Child Doesn't. That was inspired by my work with students who went to school instead of being homeschooled. Mm-hmm. And I think, I don't blame students for the fact that I felt like in my work with them, I often felt like they were just far off from their potential as learners, that, they had this incredible potential, and yet just their behaviors around learning, kind of the cycles of self-judgment that I just noticed them. Like, if you're working one-on-one with a student, you just notice they're not present, they're worried about X, Y, or Z. And so it's hard to even kind of engage with new material, because it's it doesn't even exist if you're somewhere else, right? So I think I'm looking at the homeschooling community kind of from the outside looking in, being like, this looks pretty good, and I'm really excited to collaborate with the community and kind of build on the insights that you guys have kind of come up with, and kind of combine them with what I've seen just through this very unique lens of one-on-one learning, especially with more kind of neurologically diverse students, because especially as you get to be a really good tutor, you find yourself kind of end up working with the kids that are harder to work with if you're not a very good tutor, which is neurologically diverse kids, which can mean kids who are very, very bright, and kids that have either learning disabilities or some psychological challenges, but most typically all of that, right? So that's what I'm used to navigating, and I'm sure homeschooling parents, some of the reasons that they're choosing to do so, some of them obviously could be religious, but also I think it has to do with their child and realizing, square peg round hole, hello, and that's been my experience, the past decade starting this company and tutoring these kids. It's just, it's like a diesel engine or something. It's just so slow to get started with these kids. But once you get them going, you're like, whoa, here we go. They're learning again and they're liking it. And there's just this magic when you're able to help a kid learn at their pace again and realize what that is. And they're like, whoa, this is learning. Like when I was a baby, I remember this, and it feels good. But I guess my whole frustration with school is that it creates this big pit or hole that you have to excavate a child from first to unschool them, right? That whole movement, right? The whole movement was one. And then, say hey, try, let's pave a new way here. I know this sounds corny, but I'm big on corniness. Let's start a new way that's where you're following your heart, your intuition, and mm-hmm. figuring out what that's telling you. Because I just think that school kind of, it screws that up. And this is the saddest thing. I'm just going to say this tragic thing. So I used to help kids with college essays and also helping them kind of write brag sheets for their people who are going to write their recommendations or teachers or whatever. So this is school-based population, but still, you have to deal with that no matter what if you're homeschooling. And I used to ask kids, in these forums, I'm like, hey, can you just describe like 3 of the most like interesting intellectual experiences you've had in, your whole like school, like all like high school, whatever, anything that was just like, whoa, I used to think this way. And I'll explain it to them this, I used to think this way and then boom, thought this way. And then the whole world changed the way I saw it. I'm describing all this. Again, saying intellectual experience, they're like, so I describe all that and still, I swear, hundreds of kids and that big fat blank. You know what I mean? Like no one could come. And I'm like, well, and start talking through it. It's like, well, what about biology? Okay, like what happened there? Like, okay, what did I do? We dig in and we're like, oh, maybe there's something. But it just always felt like I was like forcing it, that it didn't actually happen. And that was the tragic thing. So again, I'm just coming to you guys, not saying like I know how to do homeschooling, because I don't. I do think that there's an opportunity for a mentor outside of the family to kind of have an outside perspective, that I think that there's something for, and also for families who are not as confident to just jump into the deep end of homeschooling, and they want to trust that there's something like, and the crazy thing is like, they want to trust like a private school that they're paying $40K, I know I'm like doing the right thing for my kid, but they're not, so, but it's like have that feeling, to that it's like, this is standard, you know what I mean? So I think that's what I'm really interested in exploring, because I think, there might be some hybrid stuff here that would allow for more families to take the jump. And so I don't know what you guys think about that, but I'm just curious about exploring those kinds of ideas.
Totally. And so our backgrounds are, Beth and I have both homeschooled our kids forever, and we both have adult kids, and we both have kids that are graduating in May. And then I have a younger one as well. I know both of our faces are like, oh, we have kids graduating in May. But they've been homeschooled, and we also come from a community of having a giant homeschool group and being around other homeschoolers all the time and having activities going on. And we just finished a podcast right before this where we were talking about how important it is to have other mentors in our kids' lives, whether that is a coach or somebody, at youth group, or other moms or other dads or whatever. So for sure, like all of that stuff definitely resonates. I think too, the fact that we have a lot of people who have come to our group in the past, but now who come to our podcast and find us online, who want to make that jump to homeschooling because they are not satisfied with whatever's happening in public school right now, which could be a myriad of things, but they want to make that jump, but they don't have the confidence. And they say, well, how am I going to teach math? Because that's not my strong suit. Or how am I going to teach biology? Because that's not my strong suit, or whatever. And I want my kid to go to college, and I don't want to ruin that for them, whatever it is. And not that they can't do those things, but that they don't have the confidence to do them, or that they maybe can't do those things, but they don't know that there are resources out there that they can use to handle all of those issues, and their kids can go to college, and they can take biology, and they can take upper level maths and all those things. So I think for sure there's definitely crossover between, whether you're tutoring a public school kid or a homeschool kid, you're still going to find those same things where there can be a need that you could fill, with your company for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think just I was just thinking that the two major things that people are really kind of paying for or buying, or like the things that count for parents with school, is the daycare aspect. It's like, oh God, I have some freedom here. Try my kid off. And then the legitimacy factor, which is, it's like Bitcoin. Everyone else, when it was doing well, everyone else thinks it's valuable, so the price goes up. So it's like it's a safety mechanism. But I think that's why I'm like exploring if we can kind of address those two pieces somehow. And because I think there is something to parents being like, holy, I'm going to be with my kids every day. I don't have any freedom. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I think that there's a huge problem, that families, I think, are the most important people for you to learn from in your life. Your romantic partner, your children. So you're constantly robbing yourself from those like authentic learning experiences all the time. You're just kind of compartmentalizing your child's life and your life, thinking it's the right thing to do. So I'm 100% in favor of like parents spending way more time with their children and learning from their children, right? Like focusing on that as being the objective, knowing that that'll be an invitation for them to learn from you. And I just, yeah, I don't know. I think that, but it's just just the idea of the freedom almost, you know, like I feel like that's what parents are kind of thinking of. They're like, but what about, you know, what if one day I'm like, have a bad day? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that might be part of it. So I'm trying to like think through like how, because I think a tutoring academy is almost like homeschool. It's just that, boop, here's your virtual Jedi tutor who's going to take some special skill that you care about and, you know, really like help you ask all the right questions. So you're like, oh, wow, you know, moving really fast. And because I think it's so, I think that's what, to me, the way I see learning is like homeschooling way better than school, you know, like unschooling, like that's the joke of it. Unschooling way like nothing, way better. Right. Like, and then homeschooling where you have some like guidance with a parent, but then imagine, I think to me, and correct me if, you know, I'm out of line here, but I just feel like someone like me literally working with so many students, categorizing, cataloging all these different student types, the way they learn, understanding the bigger picture, how things compare, right? And like, and really kind of trying different things out with different students and like having just like this intuitive, all these kind of things that are clunky for most people is completely automatic for me in terms of just reading kids' minds and knowing where they're at. And then just kind of thinking like, yeah, like imagine that's like jet fuel, you know, like, and for their passion, or for something like, hey, if you want to like, this is a little dicey, let's make sure they have a killer SAT score or something like that. Makes sense, you know? I'm just like, I don't know. I just think that there's something there where there's like, you know, you got your learning journey, you're in control. Like you want to go next level in this, okay, oh gosh, you're bringing this guy on. Holy cow. Right. And then you're taking off in that direction. I think that's the kind of world I want to live in, honestly. So that's what I'm trying to create.
I love that. So you mentioned you do not have kids. So did you go to public school yourself or were you homeschooled?
Good question. So no, didn't have the luxury of being homeschooled. I went to public school for up until high school, and then I got this massive financial aid package to go to this very nerdy all boys Catholic school. There's only like 30 kids in my entire graduating class, and it was, I think it was the best thing that school can be, basically, because it's just, there's just not the same pressures. I mean, we were all nerds, and like in terms of like, you know, the fights that would happen is like kicking each other in the shins kind of level, you know, like rolly backpacks, like all the whole works, right? So there was this different. There wasn't all that. The theater wasn't there. We were interested in ideas, for sure. So I think, you know, like I was really lucky to experience that social suicide at that moment in time.
Well, and so you,
but no homeschooling. So I'm again outside looking in, being like, "This
right.
is cool,"
Yeah.
right? So that's where I'm at, and knowing with 100% confidence that it's the right direction, you know, or at least in the right direction of where I think things should be going, based on
Right.
just thousands of hours of just this slapping me in the face of like, oh my God, like I just wish, from either an emotional perspective or just even kids being aware of their own brains, what works, what does, you know, and having self-awareness, that being part of the learning process. It's not in school. Like, I mean, like we do cognitive assessments like an hour long with every kid that we work with. So we like, and we have, and I created this like learner behavior test, which is called the I-Savant assessment, like how to help kids like really access their inner savant. It's just a quick free 5-minute test. But I just think that like no one's anywhere close to like what, like, I mean, like just even if I'm watching over the course of a tutor relationship, that might even be 4 or 5 months for test prep. I'm like, you know, they go from like, you know, in a tunnel to being like, yeah, right? And I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, right? Like, and I'm just like, that's why I'm so curious about the potential of more.
Right.
To me, it's like so simple in a way. It's like time spent learning versus time being in a state where you probably can't really learn at all. And most kids in school, the latter, like the second half, like that's where they're at most of the time. And they get so stressed trying to squeeze in learning moments around the edges of structural stuff, screwing them up. Yeah, I mean, and that's just like a tiny fraction of what I talk about in my book, but it's just crazy how much like of an understanding of the world and what's wrong with it in school, particularly, you can just get from just a one-on-one tutoring session with a kid. I mean, so much to learn just from kids.
Yeah.
For sure.
There's such a difference between, well, in my worldview of, I mean, my little part of the world, like, and like speaking with homeschool kids versus the public school kids that we know. And all of them are good kids. They're all sweet kids. But there's a difference with like the curiosity levels and and like just the freedom to love reading or love reading what they want to read. And like that helps them dive deep into the things that interest them versus this is what you have to read today. This is what you, and so it's just so cool to see the difference in it. And that alone sells it for me. Like that's pretty amazing. The love of learning.
I mean, that, and I just think that we are destroying people's intuition, just like the kind of idea that learning kind of happens more where we get this intuition and we're like, what's that? And then we kind of like go out in the world and we're like, wait a second. You know what I mean? And then we start to like figure it out. And then using kind of all of those like, all the thinking faculties and the reconciliation of what I thought before and what I'm thinking now, and then integrating that new thing. But like that's framework is based on like searching for something new versus being like, hey buddy, this is all the stuff we know as a society. Can you learn this now? Like it's like if you don't figure this out, like you should be worried about yourself just so you're aware. You know what I mean? Like this is the message we are clearly sending to children. And like it's just so subtle. If you take enough time to pay attention to how people actually learn, what's memorable, what makes them not fall into cycles of self-judgment, you start to realize all you got to do is turn them toward the unknown. Instead of being like, okay, just focus on what we know already, and you better learn this. Be like, hey, let's solve this new problem. This is something we're not sure about, and maybe it's, just like, let's investigate what the heck's going on here. Right. And then like literally step one in that situation is the kid's going to have to turn around and be like, well, what do we know so far? And then they learn that exact same crap in a way that doesn't cause all that same baggage. And it's just like, these are obvious realities that if you watch a kid, you'll be like, duh. But school is structured in a way that they can't even have a real feedback loop. You know what I mean? Like there's just no feedback loop. The problem with parents being kind of, in my opinion, not to say something controversial, but based on my experience, parents who send their kids into school, again, I'm not well versed in the homeschooling parents. You guys are probably all superstars. But my experience is kid equals blind spot for a lot of parents because they're just, there's so many stressors. They're like, I need my kid to be okay. And so if they need them to be okay, then that means they're going to be not paying attention to anything or trying to ignore or suppress things that slightly make them feel like things might not be okay. And that means you are really giving up a learning experience about your kid, kind of like seeing what are they really trying to communicate to you and all that stuff. So I think just having some outside perspective, just having some humility as a parent, because, as a tutor, I've been wrong before too, but I just knowing takes a couple people to kind of like get a sense of your kid. And especially when you have that kind of like broad, like hundreds of kids you've worked with, you're like, okay, I can see this broader context. And it can really help things like not seem as bad, first of all, because it's like, hey, I've seen this before. but also give some unique insight about like what needs to change to make things faster. One thing that I talk about all the time is how, a lot of these neurological things going on, ADHD, anxiety, depression. I mean, a lot of it just has to do with basic brain health, and we're always looking for traumas and all that stuff to explain everything, but that's going to be a part of it, but way more so just simple physiological, neurological reality. So it's like, for me, for example, parents like, my kid's really distracted or my kid's really anxious all the time. And then there's thinking, okay, therapist or whatever. And then outside perspective, Ian comes in and is like, actually, I've had like a specific kind of like biotoxin illness where I was like feeling anxious for a while. And I did a detoxification protocol and it changed the way my brain worked. And holy cow, it's like crazy now. And it's like, parent would never think that. They would just be like, whatever, it's already in their conscious reality. And they're going to be pushing those buttons as much as they can. So I think it's just really helpful because it's like to remember that, having a child is like this, like pact with learning. You're like, I got to keep learning as a parent. So if I don't, then my child's going to stop learning. And that's what I notice. Because this is both parties. Everyone's a reflection of each other. Everyone who went to school, at least. So nothing about homeschool parents. This is just kind of like all the people are doing the wrong stuff, but you know what I'm saying?
Well, Beth and I both went to public school,
Okay.
but we both chose not to send our kids to school.
Yeah.
And our spouses went to public school and whatever, but we, chose totally different paths. And having kids that are neurodivergent, in our own families and raising those kids, I mean, we definitely see what it looks like to have kids of all different levels and to know, we have to individualize how they learn and what they learn and how they take things in. And I mean, it definitely is not something that I feel like with my own kids would have gone over well had they ever gone to public school. And, instead I get the opportunity to be there to know exactly how they learn best, to see what they do, where they like gain that inspiration and where they just all of a sudden, things explode for them, whatever. You're like, aha, that's the thing. That's the way we're going with this, this will go this direction. And being able to watch that in them is, number one, amazing as a parent. But number two, being able to say, okay, well, when we're learning this next thing, let's go this way. We also are big on finding their passions when they're young instead of waiting until they're out of school and, out of college and then being like, oh, what do I actually want to do with my life? And now I'm lost. And, instead finding their passions when they're young and when they have a lot of free time because they don't have to spend all day sitting at a school desk and then go home and do a bunch of schoolwork. So they can learn all the stuff they want to learn. They can explore and find their passions, and then they can just, go off in that direction and spend a million hours on them. But I did want to clear up one thing. So when you were kind of talking about unschooling, it is a different thing than deschooling, which is, I think, what you're referring to. And I only am mentioning it because our listeners might be like, wait, is he really talking about unschooling? So deschooling is the period of time after you take a kid out of public school where you're kind of resetting and learning about them and finding out information and seeing how they learn best. And you're really just like letting them have their interests and being there with them during that, versus unschooling where, you're just following their passions, in their educational life. So anyway, I wanted to clear that up in case, people are listening and they're like, wait, is that really unschooling or deschooling?
Thank you. I think I combined those terms a little bit. Yeah. But I was kind of referring to both sides of that, but using the same term. But thanks. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So can you actually tell us about Streamline Learning? So you've kind of talked about what you do as a tutor, but can you tell us like actually what Streamline Learning is and what you guys do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started as largely doing test prep, working on the SAT, ACT, and for kids who want to go to private school, there's the SSAT, ISE, HSBT. So a lot of parents kind of like that became kind of a driving force. A lot of parents kind of think like, this is what I need to do. Out of that, we started to we created a service called the Tutorial, and this service is really built around just how, like, first of all, really focused on the idea that it's not just kids who are struggling in school who need tutoring. In fact, they shouldn't be in school. So the it's really like the idea that, hey, if you have a mentor and that mentor is really focusing on the skills that count in today's world, and for me, that's communication, that's problem solving, and that's being like your best self as a learner. And so that boils down into like reading, math, and kind of personal development. And that's our tutorial. And so we kind of stole the name from Oxford and Cambridge because they're kind of the one elite university kind of situation that integrates the tutorial like into their whole like education practice. And I think it's a huge benefit because I think a lot of smart kids, or like a lot of kids who are neurodiverse, or just have learning disabilities are going on, it's like they're not integrating all the way. They're quick to get, but then there's not someone necessarily asking them 100 questions that help them kind of understand a concept in multiple contexts, make it really part of who they are. And I think that's what the tutorial is really built on, is that, the personal development aspect, the reading, the math, all the, concepts, ideas. One thing is just seeing them and understanding them. The other is making it part of you. And I think that's where tutoring comes in. It's just like, people don't realize that learning is a behavior thing. And the idea is that ultimately the way you see the world and you act in it is going to change as a result of all this. So I think there's so many kids, I don't know about homeschooling, but at least in school, not integrating all the way. Not really. Like they're like, I learned that 2 years ago. That means I don't know it now. If they learned it 2 years ago from me, they know it now. Like that's the difference. So like, I will never forget this, like just period, ever. And so it's just because it's not just the 100 questions that I just am so annoying. I can't stop asking them questions. It's not just that. It's the relationship. It's like I'm joking all the time. We're laughing and crying together. So it's this whole emotional roller coaster, which is what learning should be, in my opinion, and it can never happen in school because you're like, imagine a kid laughing and crying being a good thing in school, back and forth. But I mean, it's like, come to Jesus or whatever your religion is, all that kind of stuff is what I like about, with the one-on-one tutoring situation. You really can dig in psychologically every which way.
I think it's good too to think about that part of it, because Beth and I have talked in previous episodes about how we've had things happen in our lives that have affected our ability to, homeschool in different ways. They've affected our kids' ability to take in information during that time or whatever, because emotionally they had a death in the family, or they had a burglary and they were afraid, or, whatever it was. And if you're just at school and expected to still show up, do the things, and remember them and learn them, and, emotionally you're a wreck because, your grandma just died or whatever it is. It's like taking that opportunity when we're homeschooling to say, like, we're going to take a break from this and we're going to do these other things. We're going to learn in a lot of other ways right now that don't look like the way you would need to learn at public school right now, because we need some time to focus on this, to deal with this. And so I think having that opportunity, when we're homeschooling, is obviously much different than kids who are in public school, who are dealing with all these other things, not to mention the social pressures and the things that they're being bombarded with at school, and still expected to learn all of those same things without the emotion.
I'm telling you, it's just like, it makes so much sense. It's just like, you think about it, it's like, as administrators in school and teachers, they think about themselves and be like, sometimes I have days where my brain doesn't work that well. I wonder if kids might feel the same way. You know what I mean? Like, and actually like realizing that structural changes need to be taking place, because like, you can't just expect what's happening. Like it's not taking care of the issue, So I 100% agree with that. It's just like, that's I think the huge benefit of homeschooling is it's a heck of a lot more human. And again, it's kind of what I'm talking about in terms of, not in conflict with your intuition. Like that's what you're saying. This like obviously intuitive in those situations to take a left turn in terms of what you're doing with your child. I think that's the beauty of like the awareness that learning is a family thing. and like we're all in this together, right? And I think I guess what I'm saying, kind of like on top of that, that's what I hope is how families should be operating, moving in the future. It makes sense, like as all of us in it together, and it's more complicated than just learning facts. It's like the emotional and all the kind of personal stuff that plays into being alive. I'm just saying, in addition, there's this kind of like, kind of Star Wars level kind of thing where it's like, boom, Jedi pops in and you're like, you ready? You ready to go and get in with Yoda here and really find out what your purpose is here in life? Let's go. And that's what that kind of futuristic future, I guess, is what I'm hoping can come a little bit sooner than other people are ready for. But that's kind of where I'm at.
Nice. We're both big Star Wars families, so we're down with that. Let's bring on the Jedi.
Well, I mean, if you think about real learning, you think about, like these fancy buildings at these Ivy League institutions, people think of that. I'm like, no, I think of Swamp with Yoda. That's learning.
Yeah, really. Playing out by the pond you learn a lot more.
Heck yeah.
So, like kids just out exploring is like a huge deal. And when they don't have time to just go run around and explore and dig under the rocks and all that stuff, it's a huge deal. And today kids are expected to sit still longer than most adults. And it's crazy what we're doing to kids right now. It's really horrible. And then they are expected to come home, go do a bunch of like organized sports, not like, I'm not against organized sports, but when they've already had an organized day, then do organized sports, and then they have to go home and do homework, and then they go to bed, and then they start it over the next day. That's
I hated that crap when I was a kid. I was just like, let me do my own thing. Good grief,
Yeah, seriously. That's when I think in my kids, they've had the most natural learning times is when they've been just having free time. Just to play and imagine and explore and see how things work on their own has been huge for them.
Yeah, I will tell you that yesterday we had a really busy day because my girls were babysitting a baby, a toddler, and they were babysitting him from 9:00 in the morning until 2:00 in the afternoon. It's a little guy that they just totally love. And then afterwards, we are also working at a farm, so we had to leave and go to the farm and work at the farm. And we were driving home from the farm, and my 12-year-old was like, so that was like from 9 in the morning until like 4:00 in the afternoon. And she was like, I think that's just too much to be doing in a day. Like, I didn't have time to do really anything else all day. And so I did say to her, I said, I want you to put that in perspective. My kids have never gone to public school, but I said, I want you to think about the fact that if you were in public school, you probably would go to school from maybe, I don't exactly know, but I think around 8 to 2:30 or 8 to 3 or something. So I said those same amount of time, but you would have had to get up really early, like your cousin who gets on the bus at like 5:30 in the morning and gets home at like 5 at night from the school. And I said, and then you would have all this homework to do, and you would have to eat dinner, and you would try to have time with us, whatever. And she was like, oh my gosh, like that would be horrible. I'm like, I know, I'm not ever going to put you in public school. So it's okay. But it was like one day she was like, that was way too much. So we got up this morning to go work at the farm before the podcast. And she was just like, but we're not babysitting today too, right? Because those two things in one day, that was such a long day. I'm like, kid, I get it. I went to public school.
I totally get it. Sorry, there might have been a plane that just flew overhead. I mean, I just feel like it's just with school, you're just setting yourself up for, failure in a lot of ways in terms of just being able to meet your basic human needs.
Right. But like thinking about the things that my daughters learned and experienced yesterday and watching this toddler and the discussions that we had about, toddler stuff and, the way toddlers' brains work and all this stuff they were learning all day. And then to go to the farm and learn while they're working on the farm, like the whole day filled with learning. And then they still had the evening with us. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I can't imagine if every day I like sent them off for the whole day. It would be so terrible. They would be, obviously one day was enough to like kill my daughter off almost. Just like, that was just too much to expect for one day. I'm like, okay, it's fine. We'll do our other stuff a different day. It's fine.
I swear there should be kind of a homeschool kind of framed movie that's like a horror movie about kids who go to school. And it's like, oh my God, this is so scary.
Oh my gosh. We took a tour of a college one time when our kids were young. And it was a community college back in California. And my kids, it had like a little daycare on the college campus where kids would like who had kids, their kids would go there. And our kids, the daycare has like chain link all around it, so fence all around it. And our kids are like, are they in, my son literally thought like, are they in prison? Like, are those kids all in prison? And then one of the other kids was like, no, that's school. And he was like, oh, okay. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, like we should not say that.
Prison's
like,
cousin. It's prison's cousin.
Yeah, your prison's cousin. No. Oh my gosh. Obviously, I do have to say, we do know that public school works well for a lot of families, and it's a great choice for a lot of families, and it's someplace that their kids need to be for whatever reason. And we have tons of public school friends and cousins and relatives, and we don't think like they're dumb for sending their kids there. We know that is where, if they feel like their kids need to be there, that's a great place for them to be. It just hasn't been the case for us. That's my disclaimer.
It makes sense. And I think it's right now, it's really a matter of like, how much does your kid match up with like the status quo? If they're not matching up, I mean, it's going to be an increasingly stressful experience for them. And
for sure,
I think the depth of learning is undeniable in the homeschooling and one-on-one situation. So I think it's something to consider even anyway, if you can, but honestly, life's hard. And that's kind of what it comes down to for a parent. So you have to make decisions. You have to make some kinds, figure out what you're going to focus on. But, I'm glad to share this information with parents to give them, more to work off of. Because I think that a lot of, this stuff is not, it's kind of a lack of information and an increase in fear because it's not what other people are doing. So I'm glad that we're kind of changing that proportion, that dynamic for parents. So.
Yeah, for sure. And with COVID, that changed, that took all of us who had been homeschooling for a lot of years, who were kind of like, you're all on the fringe, you're a bunch of weirdos, to being like, oh, wait, we've been home learning with our kids. And now we're recognizing maybe this is a better place for them to learn. Or in some cases, they were like, no, I'm ready for my kids to go back to school. But, whatever. But honestly, it changed even in terms of homeschool groups and homeschool co-ops and stuff. It's changed the entire landscape of homeschooling because we got this giant influx of people who decided, wait, we actually could do this. The people that never even thought in any way that they would want to homeschool their kids are like, wait, this actually worked out better for our family. So we do, we can do this, but then still needing some supports. And it's good when there are places like your company who can offer those supports, to be able to help people along the way.
I'm trying to figure out a way for that daycare aspect of school. I think that's the key piece, like how can, just in case parent needs to not be around or whatever,
and if parents work around or, work outside the home, if both parents work outside the home, then obviously that's a tricky situation because what do you do, especially if your kids are younger and can't be home by themselves or don't have older siblings home for them? Obviously that's a huge piece to the puzzle for a lot of people who aren't able to have their kids at home. And you mentioned that daycare aspect before. And I think too, as homeschoolers, the frame, not just the parent perception, but even the framework itself changes some because the time that we have with our kids isn't the only stressed out time where we're trying to rush out the door to get to school in the morning, and only the stressed out time when the kids are home, we have to hurry and make dinner. I just got home from work and now we have baseball practice and whatever. And now they have to do their homework and now they have to go to bed. It's not all of that stuff. It's all of this every single day, the whole week of learning, the whole year, instead of this tiny bites of time that are very stressful and kids are exhausted from these long days and you're exhausted from being at work all day or whatever. It's a different time that we are having with them. So I think that the idea that, sure, do we all need a break from our kids sometimes? Yes, but it's definitely different qualities of time that we're able to spend because it's not only the stressed out times that we're with each other.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, like
a friend
of mine, she had always had her kids in public school and she felt really strongly that it was time to pull her kids out of public school and homeschool them. She did not want to do that, but she felt like that was the right thing to do. So she did it. And she said the interesting thing she discovered was that she didn't know she liked being around her kids. She knew she loved them, but once she started homeschooling them, she was like, this is amazing. I love being around my kids. And everyone will still need a break now and then, but the needed breaks are a lot less as a homeschooler. I swear, as a homeschool parent, like it changed it so much, like for her. And I was like, that's true. Cause I never understood when people would be like, oh, I can't wait for the kids to go back to school. And I'm like, but I like being with my kids. Am I a weirdo? And then what I realized, I was like, oh, they just didn't know that they would have fun if they weren't so overly, if it wasn't so stressful. If imagine like you're picking them up and then having to make them do homework after they were already sitting down all day long. I mean, that's harsh, like for everybody.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm not saying that at all. I'm like thinking my framework is like, one, like tutoring that I do is like 5 to 10x more effective. So you're literally like just the school day goes like shoot to nothing, and then it's like a play center where it's like you can go off and meet with your tutor in a virtual situation. And then otherwise you're just out playing, and then but otherwise you can go home and then you can meet virtually if you're at home. It's kind of the option basically.
yeah.
And that's all I'm like, cause it's just that, like, that's all I'm trying to do. I'm trying to speak parents who are on the other side, who are just like, because it's just the optionality. I think without it, they're like, because they're not able to see yet what you guys have experienced, because it's like a different conscious reality almost. It's like, that stress, I think the way you were describing it, just like those bites of time that you're barely squeezing in. And it's like, that's been going on for so long for so many people. They can't even conceptualize what you're talking about. And so they're just like, that's some stuff I don't understand. And sure, that sounds like, maybe for you, but like, I know how stressed I am, but you're like, but hold on, just think about you being less stressed. And that's where you're at. You know what I mean? Like, but people have a hard time conceptualizing different like perceptual frameworks that way. It's just tough. It's really tough. I'm trying to convince people of all kinds of things on that front, but it's like, it's just, they're like, hey, there's something wrong with you. I'm like, okay, sorry,
Well, I think that's true. And I think too, you said the option of, having an option to help with things. I think for some parents too, because, maybe they don't feel adequate in some way. Maybe they're like, I went to public school and I did not learn the things. I don't remember the things. So in this one subject, I don't think I'm going to be able to teach my kids. And having the option to do that, whether that's with math or, I did not teach my kids to play musical instruments, but I had someone else do that because that was important for us. I didn't teach them how to do parkour, but we had someone else do that because it wasn't within my wheelhouse. Whatever. Like, there are things that, as long as those options are there, we can use them and they can greatly enhance our experience and take that stress off of us some. If my biggest stressor is I do want my kid to be a successful young adult and adult person, and I don't think I'm going to be able to teach them math, but you can have somebody do that for you. That takes the stress and, says, it helps people to say, maybe I could do this.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of like starts with family, then it's kind of like the tribe. And then what if your tribe is full of Jedis? It's like, whoa, hold on a second. Yoda, Obi-Wan, like, come on, this is crazy. And that's what, because I'm like interacting with that. And I just want to say one thing that I think aligns here is that we have this nonprofit that we've turned into the Brilliant Brain Institute. And we're doing this research about how kids who have susceptibilities to, anxiety, depression, ADHD, and autism, dyslexia, manic depression, blah, 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 like the tough stuff that often is causing parents to choose to keep their kids home is almost always a combination of genetic factors and environmental factors, especially in the home with like mold and things like that. Like, it's just way more intense than people realize. So we're using this research to really be the basis of this idea of like a tutoring academy for brilliant kids. And like, again, understanding the idea of brilliance broadly, that there's cognitive gifts all over the map, whether it's emotional intelligence, crazy memory skills, crazy perceptual abilities. It's not just IQ. And really recognizing that there's some crazy connections with about basically, I mean, it's crazy. Like 25% of the population has some of these genes that are kind of susceptible to all these things. And it's interesting because it's like susceptible to like, toxin, things that kind of cause your brain, to be basically compromised. Also seem, from my vantage point, seem to be highly correlated to brilliance potential. And it's a question of addressing the environmental factors and having kind of mentors and like an actual kind of learning situation that works. I'm just thinking like crazy potential. So we're doing the research on the physiology side, and then we're kind of simultaneously doing our service, the tutorial for kids who want to kind of move along in at least those 3 areas, and seeing like, wait, is there like a new thing here that's like a kind of takes the best of both worlds, again, starting with the family, but then having that option, drop off at a play center, playing out, hop in with your, Jedi tutor. And like, that could be education, and so you're learning from your family, you're learning from other kids, and you're learning from Yoda. So I think like that's where we're headed. So I just say that in case there are any parents out there who have those kind of kids who are like, the twice E kids, or not even that, just pay attention to how anxious your kid is, and try to think about like, this might be an indirect indication of their perceptual capacities, of something that's actually pretty incredible, and that there's ways to address the bad stuff and get to the good. And so I say all that so like join our study, so we'll be putting out more and more information, and it'll definitely be out by the time this episode airs. So
that's super cool. I have a daughter with autism. I mean, Beth and I both have kids that have some special needs. So
brilliant genes. Yeah, I'm telling you, it's crazy.
But it's cool to learn, more information, and we're always trying to learn more information about those types of things, and gut health and brain and, all of those things.
Can I tell you a quick gem on that front real quick?
Yes.
So key indicator, a hormone called MSH, methyl stimulating hormone. I forget, but just type in MSH.
Okay.
Those levels are low, which is usually a result of having a gene type that makes it hard for you to get rid of toxins that are rampant in the world. So that's low. Suddenly your gut protection and your sinus protection gone. And so you start to have all these problems, very common among autistic kids and individuals, period. You address the toxin stuff, and then you take a hormone that it's not MSH directly, but it corresponds with it, elevates those levels back. Dramatic, insane. How like not just gut function, brain function, dramatic. And I just want to put that out there for everyone to know.
Okay.
Go to your doctor, get your kids MSH tested, get a sense. And if you want to learn more, reach out to me, because there's some incredible medical kind of bases of what's going on with kids psychologically. The vast majority of doctors simply don't know about, and there's about 20 to 30 that do, and they're saving people's lives and really transforming kids and parents too, to honestly be able to learn and be happy again. So
yeah, that's awesome. Well, what I was going to say about that is having a daughter with autism, I am able to see not only how she learns to get, to the places she needs to go, but I'm able to see these amazing things that she can do, versus if she was in school, she would not believe she was an amazing person. She would not believe the talents that she has that are so valuable, that we rely on because she's so amazing in so many ways. She wouldn't know that. And those things would be not beaten out of her physically, but possibly that too. But they would be beaten out of her because she would only know, I'm not able to do this in the same way as other people. My brain works a little bit differently than other people, whatever it is that would cause her to feel a way that would obviously be hindering her learning and growth in a lot of other ways. And so being able to be at home and see what she can do and who she is without public school getting in the way of us. It's amazing. It's amazing.
I'm telling you, it's like kids learn stuff at school. They learn the wrong things about who they are, and they learn the wrong stories and about like who they are as individuals. And the one thing I just want to say that I've noticed this whole podcast is you guys always say public school. I work with a lot of private school. Not better. Yeah. Let's just be clear here. My private school, sure, that was like a special situation, but the vast majority, holy cow, you might as well just pile up a bunch of cash and burn it in a dumpster. I swear to God. So I just to be clear here, I don't differentiate. I'm like, everything's out. Come on.
Yes.
It's even worse because think about it. In public school, at least you have diversity. And if you learn to communicate with people who have different walks of life,
Yeah.
that helps. But if everyone's thinking the same way, coming from the same kind of background and all that, nobody's learning. You just take it, a notch down from what already, what school already is. It's worse.
Yes.
And
Well, I
there's more
think
pressure.
we usually say public school because otherwise the tendency, people who don't homeschool sometimes will say, here's my quote unquote real school. They'll say, well, real school. And so instead, as homeschoolers, I think we tend to automatically default to say public schoolers versus homeschoolers, or public school versus homeschool, because we don't want people to think like it's not real school. Oh, homeschooling is real school. Trust me. The amount of stuff our kids learn, real school. Doesn't mean we have
I
to
think
sit in
school
this
is the
building.
problem. It's like learner development. It's like the word school is like indoctrination. That's what it means. Like, when I was in middle school and played basketball, I would tell my friends, I'm going to school you in one-on-one. It wasn't like, oh, well, I'm going to help you like learn as a basketball player.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, it's true. Okay. So we are getting close to the end of our time. Can you just tell us real quickly what ages or grades are your program geared toward?
Absolutely. So 4th grade to like 10th grade level, kind of 9 on up are ideal for the tutorial that kind of like chase the reading, math, and learner development. That's kind of our bread and butter. And, with that, we do kind of try to inform parents around these like kind of physiological realities that might be impacting kids' learning, because these are brilliant kids. So that's another piece that we're developing, is this coaching kind of thing for family that goes along with the doctors that we're partnering with, because we're seeing learning as like this, big, much bigger than people realize. It's like the most important thing and all that. So there's that. And then obviously we do our, if you're interested in test prep because you're thinking college and you're like, we need to make sure we have a ringer in here to give my kid more options as a homeschool student. That's where we can really come in. And the tutorial can make SAT prep kind of like not necessary, because you're really moving the dial on reading and math that you learn in high school and integrating it. So it's like when the test comes, they're not like, I don't remember this. They're like, I remember this. And I can see it in multiple ways. So it's like, wow, it's like, it's not that bad. And you're like, wait, now you get it. The test isn't that bad either. You know what I mean? So those are the main things that we offer. And then there's the last piece is just what I was saying. The coaching is that we're starting this kind of this it's called a group. It's called Born Brilliant. And it's really about like parents who are thinking like, you know what? Nothing else matters. Our like protecting the brilliance, the happiness, and the neurological kind of like, safety of myself and my kids, number one. Because if it's not, you're going to fall back into kind of poor brain health, and your world changes in that situation to be more negative fundamentally. And so, that's what I'm most excited about, is partnering with doctors and really, because this is what I'm talking about, and it's a whole can of worms that we don't have time to get into. It's just, it's a massive learning change for families to really kind of shift from good enough to being like, no, putting ourselves first, doing the things that count and make us feel like human, feels like we're learning, not stuck, and not overly stressed and overwhelmed. And it's like and this is what I notice, is because people are not quick to do this, right? Is that it's like you're in this toxic relationship with yourself. You know what I mean? And like, people don't want to get out of toxic relationships. They're like, that's scary, And so, and like to like let go of all that, follow your heart, like that's what we're talking about here. So corny. I mean, I try to take myself seriously, but I'm like a Disney movie,
Yeah, no, it sounds like homeschooling to me. Talking about like focusing on the important parts and the relationships and mental health and all of that stuff, along with a love of learning. Like, it sounds to me like you're speaking our language already. So that's
absolutely
awesome.
It was great to meet you guys. I know we're out of time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It sounds amazing. Your program sounds awesome.
It does. Thank you so much, Ian. And you will send us a link that we will have in the show notes so people can find your program, which would be great, and a link to your book.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ian.
Take care, guys. All right.